The White House. The President's House. 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. The White House has been called many things throughout its history, but one thing you might not know to call it is a national park. The White House has a long and complicated history, one that lies at the intersection of democracy, racial inequality, urban design, historic preservation, the First Amendment, and much more. But what is it about this building that's so iconic and so evocative of America that it's preserved as a unit of the national park system? This is the story of why the White House is a national park. And this story starts with the history of the White House itself. It was designed by James Hoban, an Irish architect who was working in Charleston, South Carolina when he was chosen to design the federal building. Hoban beat out several other architects in a competition for the right to help design the building, including a design submitted anonymously by Thomas Jefferson himself. Hoban designed the White House in the neoclassical architectural style, modeling the federal building after Leinster House, home of the Irish Parliament, among other influences. And although the cornerstone was laid in 1792, the White House wasn't ready for occupation for another 8 years, by which time John Adams and his wife Abigail moved in. Every American president since has lived here. This is in spite of the fact that only the exterior walls survived after the British set the building ablaze during the burning of Washington in the War of 1812. President James Madison had it reconstructed almost exactly to its original design. The White House would also require a complete interior renovation in 1949 during the Truman administration, after structural deficiencies meant the building was on the verge of collapse. The facade of the White House, however, remains largely as it was upon reconstruction in 1817, despite the extensive interior renovations and exterior additions. The White House grounds and its surrounding parkland, collectively called President's Park, have also seen their fair share of changes over the years. Originally included as part of Pierre Charles L'Enfant's overall plan for Washington, D.C., President's Park was intentionally designed with sightlines in mind. His plan would include grand avenues and monumental vistas, each designed to reinforce the grandeur and importance of the newly created capital. One such avenue is Pennsylvania Avenue, which connects, both visually and physically, the White House with the United States Capitol building. And although not part of L'Enfant's original plan, President's Park is also visually connected to the Washington Monument, the Jefferson Memorial, and the National Mall. Today, President's Park has several distinct yet interconnected areas, including the White House itself, Lafayette Square, the Eisenhower Executive Office Building, the U.S. Department of the Treasury, the Ellipse, and numerous monuments and memorials. The White House doesn't fall into one of the main national park designations, though. In my last video on the types of national parks, I mentioned that the Park Service has what it calls other designations for special units in the Washington, D.C. area. The White House is one of these units. It was designated as a part of the National Park System on September 22, 1961, although the National Park Service has been involved at the White House in some capacity since 1933. But designating the White House as a unit of the National Park System isn't as straightforward as you might think. The White House comes with its own set of logistical challenges, given that it's also a private residence and the seat of the executive branch of the American government. In spite of these challenges, however, the Park Service would have evaluated the White House on the following 4 criteria when considering it for a national park designation. 1. Is it a significant natural, cultural, or recreational resource? 2. Is it suitable as an addition to the national park system? This criteria has a lot to do with whether or not the resource in question is already represented in the park system or protected by another agency. The third criteria concerns the feasibility of being included in the park system, meaning that the Park Service should be able to protect the resource in the long term at a reasonable cost while also accommodating members of the public. And finally, the National Park Service should be able to manage the resource directly as the best management option, rather than a local agency, private entity, or nonprofit. Places that don't meet these criteria tend to be affiliated areas of the National Park System, which I also touched on in my Types of National Parks video. In general, then, the White House meets these criteria, but the National Park Service also lists several specific reasons for why preservation is warranted, which they differentiate between President's Park and the White House itself. Let's start with the White House. First, as home of the president, the White House is inseparably linked with the office of the presidency. It's the home of the first family, but it's also a place where vital diplomatic meetings take place and landmark legislation is signed. Its significance is different depending on what function the building is fulfilling at any given time, but the one constant is the office of the presidency. The White House is the backdrop to all of this, providing stability and consistency to the 45 presidents that have come through its halls. Similarly, the White House is a symbol of the ideal of American democracy. It's the only executive residence in the world that's open to the public, an intentional choice to reflect a commitment to transparency and the democratic process. The National Park Service is steadfast in maintaining the building and its surrounding grounds in order to ensure the symbolism continues. Lastly, The White House itself is vital for its value as a museum because of the amount of fine art, artifacts, historical documents, collections, furnishings, and other historically significant items it contains. These artifacts and collections provide a look directly into the nation's history. Visitors can learn about the history of slavery at the White House, the Lewis and Clark expeditions, FDR's fireside chats, and more, which collectively help tell the story of America. The White House itself is also historically significant, given that it is the oldest federal building in Washington, D.C., and a prime example of early 18th century American architecture. In terms of President's Park, the National Park Service again lays out specific reasons for preservation. First and foremost, President's Park is a vital public space in the heart of Washington, D.C., providing a place for recreation and casual gathering in the nation's capital. In fact, the need for functional public space was recognized by L'Enfant in his plan for the Capitol, making President's Park a significant example of late 18th century landscape design as well. But the President's Park open space isn't purely for recreation. It's also an important place for First Amendment gatherings. Given the significance of the White House in American public life and the symbolism of organizing an assembly in front of it, numerous First Amendment gatherings take place in President's Park each year. In the end, the White House isn't your typical national park. You won't find any mountains or rivers here. You won't find any hiking trails or rugged wilderness either. But you will find, perhaps, the quintessential American building, a building that encapsulates America's complicated past and idealistic future. A building whose significance lies not only in its design, but in its symbolism. That is why the White House is a national park. Stay tuned for more parks and protected lands content. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.